Halt! You violated our law! Seriously, why are you here? Go watch Avarti's part first, because this is our video on the entire Septim dynasty, where we cover every emperor within the Septim line. So, this is part 2, and we start with Pelagius Septim III here. But if you want to see part 1 from Tiber Septim to all the way up to Magnus Septim, go and watch his video. It's in the link down in the description and in the eye icon like this entire time, I believe. So go watch that first and then come back to this video and we'll have a great time. So, with all the little chickens out of the pool, let's start with the video. As I said, we begin with Pelagius Septim III. Pelagius Septim III, or Pelagius the Mad, was one of the worst rulers of the empire to have ever existed. Avarti actually did an in-depth video on him, so for him you will have to watch this video that's in the eye icon right now, and in the description. But in short, he was the 12th emperor of the Septim dynasty, and was a half-breed between Altmer and Imperial. When Emperor Magnus died, that we discussed in the last video, he and his Dunmer wife Kataria took the throne of the empire. Pelagius was never the true ruler of the empire. Most decisions were either made by the Elder Council or his wife Kataria. This was because Pelagius was actually unfit to rule because of his very troubled mind. One example showing his inability to rule was that when an Argonian official came to visit court, he only spoke to him in grunts and squeaks, as if he was speaking the Argonian language. And at one point it became so bad that he started biting and attacking visitors to the White Gold Tower. He was then sent to private estates. Well, they were asylums really. Well, he died not much later, but while he was in the asylums, the entire reign over the empire was taken over by his wife and by the Elder Council. Thus ushering in the reign of Empress Regent Kataria Septim.
Kataria Septim is probably one of the most successful Septim emperors, contrasting with the reign of her husband Pelagius the Mad. Some scholars have even gone as far to say that Kataria's 46-year reign was the most glorious Tamriel had ever seen since Tiber Septim himself. It is said that Kataria was uncomfortable in the Imperial city, and during her reign travelled extensively throughout the empire. She repaired the damage her eccentric husband had caused on the diplomatic front, and she strengthened foreign ties and alliances. In fact, her reign was so successful that the people grew to love their monarch far more than the nobility did. In retrospect, it seems almost strange that the coronation of the undesirable manic emperor Pelagius would eventually lead to decades of peace and prosperity for the empire under his wife Kataria.
After Kataria died in the year 200, her son, Cassynder Septim, came to the throne. Cassynder Septim was the 14th emperor of the Septim Empire, and he inherited the throne from his mother when she passed in a minor skirmish in Black Marsh, something that has led some people to conspire that somebody had wanted her dead, but all we know, it was an accident. His rule was only brief, since he was already of an older age and his health was already rapidly declining. He originally did not desire the throne of the empire, but he was pressed into it since he was the only remaining true relative of Pelagius Septim III, and with that, Tiber Septim. However, as I said before, his rule was short and he died rather quickly after taking the throne and was succeeded by his half-brother, Uriel VI, or later Uriel Septim IV.
Uriel IV was a weak emperor whose reign was one of sedition. Some scholars have commented that the Elder Council, through a series of conflicts with the weak, bastard-born emperor, won dominance and became the true authority within the empire. It was this council of the most powerful nobles that ran day-to-day business, with Uriel IV acting as little more than a figurehead. Due to the man's bastard-born status, his son was disinherited by the Elder Council, and the crown instead passed to Cephorus Septim III. It's actually remarkable how many parallels can be drawn between Charles I of England's conflicts with Parliament and the ensuing civil war, and the reign of Uriel Septim IV and his conflict with the Elder Council.
When Uriel IV died, the throne passed to his cousin, Cephorus Septim II. Cephorus Septim II was the 16th emperor of the Septim Empire, and was rather voted into power by the Elder Council instead of directly inheriting the throne. This was because of the son of the previous emperor, Uriel Septim IV, was disinherited by the Elder Council and instead chose his cousin, Cephorus. Because of this, the first years of his rule were marked by war with the forces of the disinherited son, Uriel Septim. Eventually the conflict ended when Cephorus gained the upper hand and proposed to Uriel autonomy as a king of Shornhelm. And well, then the conflict ended. However, this did not mean a peaceful rule for Cephorus. For a few years later, the Cameron Usurper, on who I did a video, so watch it, it's also in the description, was on his doorstep. The Cameron Usurper is a subject on its own for an own video, as I said, but for starters, he was a member of the Valenwood Cameron dynasty, the ages-old family that had ruled Valenwood in the past. However, by some it's argued that he was merely a pretender. This usurper was the one that temporarily freed Valenwood from the Empire, destroying all opposing forces using Daedra. When he had freed Valenwood, he proceeded northward, destroying Quatch and entering Hammerfell. Eventually he was defeated at High Rock by the Breton kingdoms. A fun piece of trivia is that, well, he left one illegitimate son, Menkar Cameron, who actually plays a large role in the Oblivion Crisis. However, it is argued that this, well, might not even be his son. But that's a conspiracy that I discuss in the video that's down in the description. It is said that when this threat came, the Empire of Cephorus was so weak due to the 9 years of war with Enderek that all he could do was send mercenaries to stop the usurper. But that those mercenaries were so badly paid that they were actually bribed by the usurper, or even just killed and raised up again as undead to fight for the usurper. Not much else is known about the rule of Cephorus other than him being the only confirmed Nord Emperor of the Septim Empire. When Cephorus died in the year 268 of the Third Era, he was succeeded by his son Uriel Septim V.
Uriel Septim V is considered by many to have been the next best warrior emperor after Talos himself. Under Uriel, the Elder Council continued to manage day-to-day affairs of the Empire, whilst the Emperor led his army in conquest. To begin with, various islands surrounding Tamriel, such as the ones between Tamriel and Akavir, were conquered, but later the Emperor would lead a daring assault on the Sachi of Akavir himself. However, after 2 years of war, in which the Empire managed to capture 2 settlements, Ionith and what came to be known as Septimia, the invasion failed, with the death of the Emperor at the Battle of Ionith, whilst the Emperor's forces were in full retreat due to repeated attacks and harsh weather.
When Uriel V had died in Akavir, Uriel Septim VI was crowned Emperor. At this time, Uriel Septim VI was very young, therefore his mother, Tonika, was given regency over the empire until he would be fit to rule. When he was 22 years old, he was officially put into the position of ruling emperor. He was then the 18th ruling emperor of the Septim dynasty. However, at this time, that did not really mean much, as in the past several years the Elder Council had been producing a lot of legislation that limited the power of the emperor. All real power within the empire was now with the Elder Council, and all the power that Uriel had left was a veto over the Elder Council's legislation. And he used that a lot. His rule was very much defined by his many disputes with the Elder Council. He secretly revived an ancient spy network and actually hired mercenary units to bully the Elder Council members into eventual submission. He did this with the help of his sister, as his sister had married a rich noble, the Baron of Winterhold. With the money of the Baron of Winterhold, he could secretly use those funds and circumvent using Imperial funds for which he needed Elder Council approval. He ultimately ended up winning back power, and some of his time period stated that Uriel V conquered Ezronit, but Uriel VI conquered the Elder Council. Uriel VI died when he fell from his horse, and when his healers failed to save him, he was succeeded by his sister.
Morihatha, like her father, had a decorated military career, but not nearly on so large a scale. Her reign was fraught with open rebellions, which she did manage to keep under control, but most importantly, her reign saw the Elder Council heel to Imperial control, something she achieved primarily through bribing, bullying, and removing its members. Eventually, Morihatha was assassinated by an Argonian Elder Council member in anger for not sending troops to quell the Argonian rebellion.
After her death, Morihatha Septim was succeeded by Pelagius Septim IV. Pelagius Septim IV was a cousin to Empress Morihatha. He was the first in line to succession because of the death of his mother 4 years prior. He was the 20th emperor of the Septim Empire, and his rule was defined by the continuation of his mother's work in trying to unite Tamriel even further. This, however, went slowly, as the different states and kingdoms had enjoyed a free leash for such a long time that they weren't really planning on having that changed anytime soon. Many kingdoms were largely independent, and Morrowind as a whole was still largely alienated from the entire empire, never truly being part of it, if only in name. However, progress was made, and when his rule ended after 29 years, the empire was more united than it had been since the reign of Uriel Septim I. When he finally died in the year 368 of the Third Era at the age of 54 years old, he was succeeded by his son, Uriel Septim VII.
There can be no doubt that you've heard of Uriel Septim VII, especially because this man has been a catalyst for a few of the Elder Scrolls games' main stories. Uriel VII has a long, interesting life story, but I'm going to limit it to the most essential, interesting points. The Emperor's reign was marked by an attempt to create a single confederate state out of the Empire, rather than a loose union of autonomous provinces. This effort was helped by the man's acutely sharp and agile mind, as can be seen when the Emperor used House Hlaalu and Morrowind to basically spread and guarantee Imperial influence there. Eventually, Uriel was betrayed and banished to oblivion by Rhaegar Tharn, spending 10 years in that hellish plane. During the time that Rhaegar Tharn posed as the Emperor, the Empire fell into disrepair and suffered economic hardship. When the true Emperor was eventually rescued, the man who returned was not the vigorous, ambitious man of his youth, but a drained, nonetheless intelligent being. The latter half of Uriel's reign saw a return to the power and prosperity the Empire held before the despotic Rhaegar Tharn. In particular, Uriel further spread Imperial religion and power in the far reaches of the Empire, particularly Morrowind. Obviously, Uriel instigated the Nerevarine prophecy by sending the prisoner to Seyda-Neen, as can be witnessed in the third Elder Scrolls game. Equally, the Emperor's death instigated the infamous Oblivion Crisis, and his son, Martin, would shortly reign as the last Septim Emperor, but still arguably one of the best as well.
And with that we have finally reached the last emperor of this long dynasty, Martin Septim. Martin Septim was the illegitimate son of Uriel Septim VII. Uriel wanted Martin to grow up away from palace life and had Joffrey of the Blades take care of him and had him raised by other parents. For this story in greater detail and more about Joffrey, you can watch my video on Joffrey, which is in the description. Anyway, Martin was taken away to other parents and grew up not knowing who or what he was, and never really met his father, Uriel Septim VII, neither really knew who he was. Uriel, however, always knew where Martin was, as he had regularly received updates on his whereabouts from Joffrey. Martin ended up growing up in a family of farmers, who he thought were his real parents. In his youth years he actually practiced some minor Daedric worshipping and ended up joining the cult of Sanguine, even coming into the possession of the Sanguine Rose for a short time. Due to the unpredictable and dangerous nature of Daedric worshipping, he and some friends from the cult ended up in an accident where a lot of his friends died. He then realized that this was not the path he should take, and instead he decided to repel his sins as a priest of the 9 divines in the temple of Akatosh at Kvatch. When Uriel VII and his legitimate sons had all been assassinated by the Mythic Dawn, he was the last surviving of the Septim bloodline. Of this he was unaware until he crossed paths with the hero of Kvatch. He then comes with the hero and goes to the Blades for protection and a plan to combat the Oblivion Crisis that has started to spark across all of Tamriel. When they reach Joffrey, the Amulet of Kings has been stolen by the Mythic Dawn. For his safety, he is then guided to Cloud Ruler Temple, a place where the Mythic Dawn assassins cannot reach him, where he is protected by the Blades, while the hero of Kvatch works to get the Amulet of Kings back outside of the temple. This fails, as Mankar Cameron, the leader of the Mythic Dawn and the son of the Cameron Usurper we mentioned earlier, teleported into his own plane of oblivion, Paradise, before the hero could snatch the amulet from his neck. The hero did find something else, however, a book, the Mysterium Xarxes, a book filled with darkness. In the book it is supposed to be a pathway to Paradise. Martin then deciphers a way to open this portal, or path, and the hero goes to Paradise to get the Amulet of Kings. In the meantime, while the hero is in Paradise, Martin has Boris, one of the Blades, go to the Imperial Palace and officially present his claim to the throne to High Chancellor Orcato. He and the Elder Council accept, and when the hero returns, Martin, Joffrey and the hero hurry to the Imperial city. Once arrived, they find the city under attack by the forces of Oblivion. And with help of the Imperial Legion, the Blades and High Chancellor Orkato, he and Joffrey and the hero fight their way to the Temple of the One to relight the dragon fires and stop the Oblivion crisis. But when they reach the temple, they find out that they are too late, for Mehrunes Dagon himself has entered Tamriel. Martin then only has one option left. He shatters the Amulet of Kings, binding himself with Akatosh in the previous Septims. He then becomes the Avatar of Akatosh and destroys Dagon's physical form, casting him back into Oblivion. Gravely wounded from the fight, the Avatar of Akatosh then transforms into stone, with Martin Septim in it, thus ending the Septim bloodline. Martin is after this remembered as the last and greatest Septim that has ever lived. With the Septime bloodline completely gone and the gates of Oblivion sealed, the fourth era was ushered in, and chaos awaited the Empire. However, you can see all that chaos in the next part of the Timeline of Emperors series me and Avarti did. I linked to it in the description. It's the part about the Mead Emperors. Well, thank you all so much for watching. First of all, take a look at Avarti's channel. He makes a lot of awesome videos and you should definitely watch them. Second, if you want to know more about the Emperors, you can watch the Riemann Dynasty video on the Timeline of Emperors and the Mead Dynasty of Emperors videos. I think we've completed the entire Emperor's timeline. I was thinking about doing the Alessian Emperors, but we don't know much about them. I could better do maybe a video on the Alessian Empire as a whole one day instead of just covering the Emperors. But we'll see about that. So, with that said, if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe to me for more lore content and an occasional parody, but it's mostly lore. And if you want personal contact with me, there's my Instagram and Discord in the description. And also in the description, if you want to support me in a more personal way, is my Patreon, which gets you your name at the end of every video, a special rank on my Discord, and some other small perks. You can look at it to the Patreon link. So, with that said, this video has been dragging on for way too long. So, yeah, we'll see you in the next lore video. Bye bye!